So, in this video, I'm going to talk about the new Archon Quest in version 4.7 called Bedtime Story. I'm going to do a story and lore summary with the focus on whatever new lore we have learned in the new Archon Quest and what it could imply. But first, as always, there is a disclaimer. The interpretation of the quest you are about to hear is just my opinion, not a fact. I could be wrong on some details, so if you have anything you wish to add to this or anything you disagree with, please tell me in the comments down below. At the beginning of this video, I just want to say, rest in peace Caribert, it was pretty cool knowing you. I hope that we would see a bit more of what he's been through and that he would have lived a good life once everything was settled, but in the end that just wasn't possible. It was really moving seeing how kind and calm he was, even though he experienced nothing but suffering and had to just disappear at the end, without the chance to even try to live a life of his own. He really didn't deserve such fate, but with that out of the way, let's start talking about the story. So let me do a very quick recap of the events of the Archon Quest. We start by meeting Catherine in Sumeru, and she tells us that there is a commission about finding a lost person in Vimara village, so we head there. After some investigation, we find out that everyone remembers the missing person, but no one knows the actual details about him, like his name and such. All we know is that everyone likes the guy, and that he was a kind young man. We suspect that for some reason he may have never been real, and that he just existed inside of everyone's memories. Later, as we notice increased villager activity around the village, we fend off some abyss mages, and we run into Dainsleif, who was fighting them as well. We talk with Dainsleif a little bit about the situation, and then we head back to the village. In the evening, Dainsleif tells us some huge lore drops, and explains what exactly we saw in the last Archon Quest, who exactly is the sinner, and so on, which I'll talk about in detail later in the video. After that, we speculate that the Abyss Order and the Loom of Fate may have something to do with the missing person. The next day, we meet Dainsleif once again, and he looks disturbed for some reason. He tells us that he suddenly remembers the person as well, the exact same way the people in the village do, even though he is sure that he has never met the person before. He seems to suddenly remember that he handed in the eye of the first field tiller, and after that, Dainsleif leads us to where he was supposed to hide the eye. On our way to the ruins, Dain stutters multiple times, and it seems like something is wrong with him. Inside, he tells us that we should separate, because the Abyss Order is planning something and we should go and find the missing person. Once the traveler leaves that place, we can see the Abyssal sibling confronting Dainsleif. Later we learn that, because of this incident, the Abyss Order eventually got the eye of the first field tiller. Meanwhile, we arrive in Vimara village and figure out that we are probably in some sort of memory, because the time isn't moving and one remembers that the missing person is missing. On our way, we surprisingly meet Caribert, who was the missing person, who recognizes us and transports us to a different space to talk in private. We learn that he has been dead for a long time, and the only thing that remains is his consciousness and that space he created. Through the altered memories of people in the Vimara village, he wanted to have another chance at life. As his last wish, he altered the memories of villagers so that they can experience the same thing he experienced when his father dispelled his fears. He tells us a lot about the Loom of Fate and what he was up to all this time, but after that his consciousness finally dissipates. Our sibling then appears and talks with us about all sorts of things, like the heavenly principles, reuniting and all that stuff that I'll get into later. Once we get out of here, we forget everything after Caribert's consciousness disappears. So we don't remember meeting our sibling at all, and after we talk to the people of Vimara village, that's basically it for the whole Archon Quest. I think that I got the answers to about everything I wanted to, but the only thing that remains unclear to me is how Clothar Aldrich died in the end. That part still remains unanswered. And in case you didn't realize this, the whole Archon Quest was named Bedtime Story because of the story that Clothar told to Caribert to dispel his fears, and also the one that he eventually told to the villagers. Now let's talk about our conversation with Dainsleif in Vimara village. There he first asks us about our sibling and if we think that they betrayed us. After our answer, he tells us that he hopes that we will make up and that the irreparable damage has not yet been done. But this is not the case for the sinner we saw. The sinner we saw back in the Caribert Archon Quest was Vedrfolnir, aka the Visionary, who is apparently one of the 5 Sinners of Khaenri'ah and Dainsleif's older brother. For now, I focus on the sinners as a whole, and later I'll talk about each of them in more detail. Dainsleif mentions an interesting concept of the 5 Sinners of Khaenri'ah. Some people already kind of suspected from what we knew that the sinners we know of may be related and that there may be more of them. Before this quest we knew of 2 sinners. First the sinner that looked like a huge hanging crystal, and then Rheindotter, aka Gold, who is also called a great sinner in the lore. It seems that all of them are inspired by Norse mythology. For example, Vedrfolnir is a hawk sitting at the top of the War Tree Yggdrasil, which is in Genshin represented by Irminsul. So the 5 sinners as Dainsleif described them to us are Hroptatyr the Wise, Vedrfolnir the Visionary, Rheindotter Gold, Surtalogy the Foul, Rerir, Rehir of Solnari, And from all of these names, the only ones we didn't hear at all yet were Hroptatyr and Rerir, who, if I'm not mistaken, we know nothing about apart from what Dainsleif told us right here. He then implied something like that the Sinners were the reason the people of Khaenri'ah were cursed, because the Sinners wanted more power, and he was talking about taking his revenge against them, and about never forgetting what they did. He says that each of them were the best in their fields, and that the 6 of them together should have prevented the Khaenri'ah disaster, and stopped the Vinister King, who is by the way probably King Irmin, from destroying the foundation of the world. But the 5 of them couldn't resist the power of the Abyss, and divided that power that could destroy the world among themselves. At least that's what he believes happened, but I have a slight feeling that this isn't the whole truth. Because of this power, they became transcendent beings, but none of them tried to defend Khaenri'ah when the cataclysm struck, and because of that, he will never forgive them. Also, a little interesting theory, maybe the 5 sinners are tied to the 5 crowns hanging at the end of the domains. Something like that actually used to be a theory in the lore community, but it was more connected to the possibility of the existence of 5, well, something like abyssal gods or archons. And another interesting thing to note that is probably way too correct is that when Dainsleif says that the 6 of them should have fought together, it reminded me of the book in Genshin called Pale Princess and the 6 Pygmies, because the princess could represent the abyssal sibling and the 6 of them would be the pygmies, even though that is probably too much of a stretch. So the Visionary, or Vedrfolnir, was mentioned multiple times throughout the recent story, especially in the Fontaine Archon Quest, where Mona said that Fontaine's prophecy is of too great a magnitude for ordinary astrologists to read, and someone who is strong enough to read such a prophecy can be called a Visionary. The Visionary is also potentially the same individual who provided the prophecy of Fontaine to begin with. Skirk learned about the Visionary from her master Subtitles and said that Vedrfolnir desires for perfection, same as her master or Daughter. And in this Archon Quest we learned that he was the voice of the Sinner and Dainsleif's older brother, who he loathes for obvious reasons. He was the one who inspired Clothar Albrich to create the Abyss Order, and also the one who gave him the power to awaken Caribert. He also seems to have the power to see through time and space, because according to Dainsleif, he saw us in the memory of our sibling. The Traveler suspects that he was the one who created the stone slides about Fontaine's prophecy we found in the ruins. Daughter, aka Gold, is a researcher and practitioner of the art of chemia, which is a Khaenri'ah alchemical art. You've probably already heard of her, but I'll give you a short introduction anyway. She's the one who created creatures such as Durin, Elinas, or even Albedo. We already knew before this quest that she was closely linked to the Cataclysm 500 years ago, and that she spawned the monsters to Teyvat. She's also a member of Hexensrke, which is an organization made of powerful witches, such as Alice or Nicole. Sotalogy, aka the Foul, is the master of Skirk, who is Child's master. We don't know much about him besides the fact that he was the owner of the all-devouring Narwhal, and is supposed to be very powerful. Also, Surtalogy is the name of the Sword of Flame wielded by Surtr from Norse mythology. The last 2 are named Hroptatyr and Rerir, who we really know next to nothing about. So from the little I know, Hroptatyr is one of Odin's names from the Norse mythology, which is very odd to me because I don't think there is any chance of him being King Irmin. Some people already pointed out that he could be Pierrot, because Hroptatyr is called the Wise, and we know that in Chinese this could also mean the Sage, and we also know that Pierrot was the royal mage of Khaenri'ah, and he said in the Winter Night Sazo trailer that the sages think they are all-knowing, but he says that we, probably meaning the Fatui under his rule, are wise. He also ironically calls himself the Jester and the Fool, so maybe there is a theory to be made. In terms of Rerir, aka Rehir of Sornari, I don't know anything about him and I have no clue who he could be. Now let's talk about how does the Loom of Fate actually work. Caribert told us that he never became the Loom of Fate, he was just a means for its construction. He says that he died the moment everything started. The Loom of Fate is a device that's capable of weaving the ley lines, which means manipulating people's memories. But in its final stages, it's supposed to lose the power to influence memories. However, it gains the power to weave real ley lines of its own, the same way the Heavenly Principles probably do through Irminsul. The Abyss Order probably wants the same power to completely change the rules of the world. It seems that their goal is somehow to use the Loom of Fate before the Heavenly Principles awaken, and from what Caribert told us about the Loom of Fate, it seems like it will basically create another Irminsul, kind of. I don't know if it will be another big tree, but it can create its own ley lines, which as we already know are the roots of Irminsul, that contain memories of the world, and you could say that they basically shape the reality of Teyvat, or rather they function as a sort of collective consciousness that shapes the whole world. If I were to use a similar analogy to the one Ashika used in one of her recent videos, ley lines are something like blueprints that tell the world how it should function, and that alternate memories of not only the people living in it, but also the whole world itself. So it is basically another Irminsul in that sense, or maybe creating new ley lines on top of the ones that already exist, but they would be connected to the Irminsul that already exists, but that doesn't seem possible. Anyway, the Abyss Order could represent something like another Heavenly Principles, and they could make their own rules. But according to what Caribert said, the new ley lines can replace or extend the ones that already exist, so it's hard to say how exactly they plan to use it. Apparently, our sibling still hasn't found a way to utilize it to its full potential. Maybe they are trying to rewrite the cataclysm that happened in Khaenri'ah, or completely erase the heavenly principles. The fact that Caribert had to disappear means that the Loom of Fate is now complete, so I think that we will see much more of it later. Also, I just wanted to mention what the lines that show up when Caribert transports us mean. It means something like, "Farewell Atosa, forgive me for making you know me unwillingly, but still I don't wish you to forget me." In case you forgot, Atosa was the girl who told us about him and how they always sat next to the tree and how they talked for hours. We also learned that she had a crush on him, and from these lines it seems like he may have liked her too. It seemed like our sibling knew Caribert for quite some time before he had to disappear, and when they talked about the heavenly principles, they mentioned him as an example of what the heavenly principles have done to the people of Khaenri'ah and how he didn't deserve that fate. It's also interesting that the abyssal sibling was able to take on Dainsleif, because even though we never really got a glimpse of his true power level, it seemed like he could be quite strong as he is the Twilight Sword. Though it's true that he supposedly lost a lot of his power after those 500 years, this means that the abyssal sibling is also quite strong. Maybe they haven't lost their powers like us, which could also explain why they still use the sword from the start of the game. Or maybe they are using some sort of abyssal power to fight. The other interesting thing about this quest was the Sea of Flowers at the end, that our abyssal sibling mentioned, because we already know that place from the Teva chapter storyline teaser, so this was our confirmation that the place indeed exists, and that it's probably where the story will end. But there is not much more to say about this place right now, other than the fact that the flowers in Lumin's hair probably grow there. In the end, I'd like to say that there is way more to talk about in terms of story and lore, but this video would be too long and too complicated. So I leave that to other people, who I'm sure will do exactly that. Well, that's it for this video, so I hope you liked it, and I'll see you in the next one.